Hi everyone. First of all, thank you to Open UK and the State of OpenCon for having me today and organizing this amazing event. Welcome to my session, the Iceberg attack surface just got bigger. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, a few things. So first of all, we will have a look at a few open software attacks and what are some security challenges that we're facing in this ecosystem. Then we'll have a look at the iceberg, and you might be like this little emoji, asking yourself, what is she talking about? Well, I'll explain to you. Then we'll have a look at a couple of security tooling and starting points to enable guardrails in our project and code base. And finally, I'll close the session with some best practices to harden your project. So there are many types of attacks for open source software. Let's have a look at 3 scenarios. The first one is typo coding attacks. So this one is usually take place when bad actors push malicious packages to registry with the hope of tricking users into installing them. This is quite similar to website phishing attacks that exploit typos made by individuals who may accidentally typing a wrong address. So here we have an example with the package React with a typo. In that case, you will not install React, but a malicious package that has a completely different end goal. And in that case, usually it captures environment variables and sends them to an attacker-controlled remote server. Another example is malicious packages, which inject malicious code into a software product in order to compromise a dependent system further down the chain. So in this example, we're having a package called Fall Guys, and usually the malicious actor will try to surf on trends. So that package, that game has been quite popular during the pandemic. And user might think that by downloading this package, they can have an advantage within the game. So in that case, this package contains malicious code that attempts to read local sensitive files and exfiltrate information through a Discord webhook. So that was the entry point. Final example is compromising maintainers, where malicious actors will use social engineering methods to gain access to open source projects. So here we have an instance with the event stream package where the malicious actor did social engineering the maintainer. So what he did, basically, he was going through all the issues and see where he could push the code. So he pushed some cosmetic changes at first to build up the trust with the maintainer. And once he got more permissions, he actually pushed his malicious payload into the code base. And in that case, it was targeting a Bitcoin wallet. So his modus operandi was quite interesting, and going through all of the issues, see if he can contribute, and then be trusted and push his code. So this is known as a supply chain attack, also called third-party attack. And this usually occurs when someone infiltrates your system through an outside partner or provider with access to your systems and data. The bad news is it doesn't affect only JavaScript packages, as I've showcased with those examples. This is an issue for all ecosystem. We had a great example 2 years ago with Log4Shell within the Java community, with the Log4j vulnerability, which actually earned a vulnerability score, a severity rating of 10 on the CVSS scale, which stands for the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. And usually supply chain attack is quite an interesting entry point for attackers. So in a software supply chain attack, usually the attacker will use malicious code to compromise an upstream component in the chain with the goal of compromising the target of the attack, which is usually a downstream component. So compromising the upstream component is not the end goal. It's usually an opportunity for the attacker to compromise the target of the attack by inserting malware, providing a backdoor for future access, for example. And here you have an example with any of the links making up the software supply chain that could be compromised. By submitting bad code, compromising the source control, by modifying the codes, by bypassing the CI/CD pipeline, and other scenarios. So vulnerabilities can originate from something as simple as a configuration error or using a software component that contains a known vulnerability, which is why maintaining and improving application security is so important for businesses, maintainers, contributors. So let's try to understand how this is possible, and let's all say hi to the iceberg. If you're still confused by this statement, let me explain it to you. So this is the iceberg, and this is usually a nice analogy to map the different layers of a modern application with a new risk profile. So you can see different layers, and if we start at the tip of the iceberg, which is the application code, this is usually the proprietary code that we write within an organization. This is usually 10 to 20% of the code base. We can have security issues at this stage. Then we have the open source layer with all the libraries and components that we add because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to waste time because we know that there is already one existing package for this feature that we want to implement. And there's also some security vulnerabilities at this stage as well. Then we have the containers layers, because we want to containerize our application. Again, we can have vulnerabilities depending on the base image that we're fetching and implementing into our project. And finally, we have the last layer with the infrastructure as code, where we need to consider the number 1 cloud vulnerability, which is misconfiguration. So now that we're more aware of our potential attack surface and the complexity that we have with all this layer, we need to think about how we can secure our software development lifecycle. So it is important to have guardrails at each stages of your pipeline to spot vulnerabilities as your attack surface is getting bigger. The good news is that you can implement guardrails within GitHub, and I'm going to go through the tools that you can find within the GitHub Marketplace by using different applications and actions, whether it's for your pet project that you want to demonstrate during your job interview or if you're a maintainer of an open source project. So this way, you can give your project the same level of protection as for a proprietary project. So what is the GitHub Marketplace? Just by a raise of hand, who here is aware of the GitHub Marketplace? Cool. Okay, so the GitHub Marketplace was first introduced during the GitHub Universe in 2016. It's a place where developers can find integration and implement them into their workflow. And you can find application and actions that covers every area, like code review, continuous integration, dependency management, and others. So first of all, what do you need to consider? So as a maintainer, a contributor, choosing a tool, application, or action will depend mostly on your project and your team's workflow. So what kind of tech stack you're using, if you're deploying to Docker, if you're using Kubernetes, how many steps do you have within your pipeline? Can you implement guardrails at each step? So you'll find many tools and applications that would cover your needs. The good news for open source maintainers is that these applications are usually free for public repos or open source projects. And you can implement, for example, 2 tools to cover one stage. So let's say to scan your dependencies, you could use potentially Synk and Mend. So both tools will have their pros and cons in terms of coverage and will help you have better visibility of your dependency on your projects. And if you think that one tool is better than the other, then you can still remove the one that you don't need. So how can you leverage security tools to create a basic pipeline and implement guardrails into your open source projects? So as I said, you can leverage the security application and actions available on the GitHub Marketplace to secure your pipeline at each stage of your development. And a basic pipeline would look like that. So you would have, for example, a software composition analysis tool to focus on identifying the open source in your code base. You would have a tool to prevent secret sprawling, so preventing pushing threads into your repo. And also a tool to cover static code analysis. But also, the most important thing is experiment. Get the right tools for your project, first of all. So let's have a look at secret sprawling. What is secret sprawling, first of all? So secret sprawl is the unwanted distribution of secrets like API keys and credentials through multiple systems. And one tool that I picked for this demo, and obviously you can actually, there's also alternatives for GitGarden, but having a look at the product page, here this will give you more information. As a maintainer of a project, you will check if this is a suitable tool for your code base, for your projects, and here we can see that GitHub has verified the application, and you will get more information on the company. But if the tool is open source, you can also navigate to the GitHub repo and have a look at how actively the maintainer and contributors are pushing to the project. How well is it documented? Is it easy to implement? Do they have like starting examples? But most importantly, would it cover your needs for your projects in terms of programming languages? And in that specific case, patterns to flag credentials and API keys. So usually when you scroll down the page, you will see the pricing and setup section. For public repo and open source projects, these tools will be free. Just need to select the account who will be responsible for installing the application. Then you'll be redirected to installing the application. You'll be prompted to install it on all repos or on selected repos. For this kind of application, I would recommend to have it installed on all of your repos, just to have the historical scan to check if you've already pushed any creds, password, or API keys. So check if you're happy also with the permissions required before implementing the tool and authorize it. And the workflow for implementing these tools from the marketplace is usually the same as this one. Then you have access to the dashboard of the tool that you've implemented, and you have visibility on all the repos that you've started importing. And then you can start the work of revoking keys and printing or cleaning your repos, depending on what you'll find. In terms of integration, a lot of these tools will propose a lot of these alternatives and options for integrating your workflow and pipelines. So if you're hosting on GitLab or if you're using a different CI/CD provider, so you'll have those alternatives usually with this tool. For this specific case, I would recommend to have a pre-commit because you don't want to, so you want to prevent a contributor or maintainer into pushing keys to your repo, and you'll be alerted through the CLI. Let's have a look at some software composition analysis tools. First of all, what is it? So software composition analysis focuses on identifying the open source and the code base, so teams can manage their exposure to security and license compliance issues. So as you can see, there's a few actors in this field. There's also many more. This is just to give you a few. Some pointers. So again, on the product page, in that case, we're interested, what's the most important here is the supported languages that is covered by the tool and how it raises a pull request. So the important thing when you implement tools is to have actionable fix. It's great to have visibility on areas where you can improve your code by making it safer, but it's even better when you have a pull request raised to actually fix the vulnerability. So the point here is to have a suite of tools that help us improving the quality of our code and not to have tool fatigue, false positive, and wasting time in general. So this is an example of a PR that can be raised by one of these tools, giving you a little bit more info around which packages which version you have to upgrade to, and if there's any breaking changes. So how does it work on GitHub now that you have installed a few of these tools? So basically, when a contributor will raise a pull request, it will trigger all the applications and the actions you have implemented within your pipeline. So for your secrets, for your components, for the quality of your code, for your images, for misconfigurations in your IC files, etc. This is what it looks like at the bottom of your pull request. You'll have the list of tools, GitHub Actions, steps that you've already implemented, if you have tests, builds, and other things that you've already set up, plus the security tools that we've added. And you can make them required also. You have the little tag on the right side. So you have a threshold that you would obviously discuss with your team, a quality threshold before merging the pull request and make sure that you have a clean build before pushing to production. Also, can you get value from ChatOps? So what is ChatOps first? So ChatOps is a collaboration model that connects people, tools, processes, and automation into a transparent workflow. So let's assume you can use a free Slack account where you can have your team or contributors discussing and having dedicated channels for specific tools. This will help you having that visibility on what is going on within your project. But most importantly, you will link all of these security tools through webhooks to feed the channels with this information. So we'd have everything in one place. And this is to set up monitoring and sending alerts, which is a vital piece where developers can help where they get the right information. So adding security guardrails at each stages of your pipeline is great, but you can also harden your open source project by applying the best practices. So let's see a couple of best practices. The first one, apply the least privilege principle. So basically, set the base permissions to no permissions on the members privilege section, so they can only clone and pull the public repos. To give a contributor additional access, the maintainer will need to add them to teams or make them collaborators on individual repos. So basically, create a team, add users, and allocate them to specific repos with specific permissions. Role-based access control. Make 2FA mandatory for all maintainers. So make 2FA mandatory for all maintainers and contributors. And also, if you don't do this, actually, by the end of 2023, GitHub will require all users who contribute code to enable one or more forms of two-factor authentication. This will be set up, enabled by default. Protect your main branch. So this is to avoid, obviously, any accidental deletion by a maintainer. So you would need to set this to protect your main branch. And also, you can record status checks to pass before merging. So if you remember the picture at the bottom of your PR, you had a list of tools with a little record tag. So this is actually where you would set it up. Review your project controls. So this would depend on reviewing the permissions for the GitHub actions. I would recommend to select the allow select actions, where you would allow the actions created by GitHub, so the one with the little blue tick, but also allow the marketplace actions by verified creators. And then you have a box where you could whitelist a list of actions that are vetted by your team. So you have already selected a list of actions that your team as maintainers and contributors could use. And also on the other side, this is the security tools that comes by default with GitHub. So this would include Dependabot and CodeQL, and this is where you would actually enable it and also set the thresholds. So depending if you want to have all of the notification or if you want to filter by only high and criticals, if you want to avoid a little bit of noise in your project. Review the checklist also within your project. So here, I know it's a little bit small, so sorry for that, but you have the security overview. So again, this is a checklist to make sure that you have a security policy, that you have security advisory, that you have Dependabot and code scanning enabled if you want to use these tools, or if you want to have alternatives. And on the other side, this is more, it's not really on the security side, but it's more like the community profile. Just make sure that you have description, a README, a code of conduct, and contributing license. Also, licensing is quite important. And make sure to have also some templates. So you have those checklists to help you have this enabled into your projects. But most importantly, showcase your project status, because you might be familiar with those little tags. So if you want to attract more contributors to your project, don't forget to showcase the health of your project using those little labels or tags that this application and actions workflow provide. And just add them at the top of your README file. So usually you would have your build tag, your testing tag. So yeah, we could also add some security tooling tags just to showcase this health. Cool. So some key takeaways. We know that open source components can be a vector for large-scale cyber attacks, and we've seen it 2 years ago with the Apache Log4j, which is an open source Java package. But while not all software written in Java is vulnerable, the affected package is widely used by developers, and there are many applications and services that use that library. And big tech firms such as Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, and others were affected. So having visibility throughout of your pipeline using different tools and guardrails is critical to reducing your attack surface. And we have seen that leveraging the application and actions from the GitHub Marketplace could help. So today, I only show you a couple of tools, but just like pointers. And you can start by creating a small pipeline. And when you get a little bit more confidence within your project, you can add more security tools on that. So as maintainers and contributors, do not hesitate to create a small pipeline for a start and experiment with some of these tools and also harden your GitHub projects for everyone contributing to it. And also the last thing, please don't push your keys on GitHub. Please. Yeah, so I'm Sonya Moisset. I'm a senior security advocate at Synk. I'm passionate about DevSecOps, open source, and cloud security. I do other things outside of Synk, but I'm not going to bore you with this today. But you can also link with me on Sonya Moisset on LinkedIn. Yeah, just wanted to say thank you for coming today at my session. I hope that you get a few pointers and guidance that would give you a little bit more appetite for securing your open source software. So yeah, stay safe in your journey to open source software contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have one question, and it's like very much kind of an open question for me. The recommendation of using Dependabot, yeah, it makes sense to update dependencies, but at least from the research that I've seen, you've got to lag a little bit behind that cutting edge. So yeah, it's great for patching, but isn't it, it's kind of this double-edged sword where you might be ingesting things automatically that you do not want to, potentially. Now, as we have increased adoption of SigStore and have more standardized security in the supply chain, great. But right now, I individually don't recommend teams to fully automate using Dependabot. Do you agree or disagree? It's a genuine open question.
If you feel that Dependabot is not the right tool for your team, I would say explore alternatives that might be that will feed less PRs, or if this is something that is bothering your team, I would say look for alternatives to Dependabot potentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's conceptually, it's all of these, so I want to be able to, potentially have Dependabot come in, but only conditionally, right? If perhaps it hits the OSSF scorecard and hits a certain rate, right? Without those checks in place, yeah, you're removing developer toil, but actually sometimes bringing in problems, right? I just think it's something that we should have more of a nuanced discussion around generally in security.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree that might be a little bit painful, that we need to have the setup. We might need to put a little bit more efforts in setting up, like putting all of these rules to make sure that we have the correct information for the developers, because we don't want to have like a suite of tools and creating that fatigue and of a lot of false positive and all of that. But from that, what I would recommend is to start somewhere for like those who are maintaining like small packages, or they might not have that security visibility. As I said, if this tool is creating a little bit too much noise into your package, look for alternatives that would better suit your project.